Welcome to this Infura webinar highlighting the Optimism ecosystem. My name is Clemens Wan, and I'll be the moderator for today. To kick off the series of presentations, we'll have Benji from OP Labs providing an intro to Optimism, why it's special, and a special ecosystem with a lot of different updates. And then we'll have EG, the co-founder of Infura, here to provide some highlights on our Optimism endpoints and statistics, and Din. And last but not least, we'll have Alexander from Velodrome, a popular DEX deployed on Optimism. So from there, we'll do a Q&A at the end. Let's do a quick action before I hand it over. I just wanted to share that the webinar today is for you and your team members, the Web3 ecosystem of developers out there. And the objective is being able to spread this awareness of all these tools and the ecosystem advantages for deploying on networks like Optimism through Infura. Okay, so our speakers are here today. Just for a fun intro, let's do a roundtable of introductions and add a fun non-Web3 fact about yourself, maybe a hobby or a cool role you had before joining Web3. So let's start with EG, since he's on the left.
Thanks, Clemens. Hi, everybody. EG, I'm one of the co-founders of Infura. These days, I'm focused on leading our decentralized infrastructure network product, which is what I'll be presenting later today. And fun fact, my first job was working at a department store customer service counter where I ran a Ticketmaster terminal back before they actually had it so that you could purchase the tickets online and everyone had to line up old school and buy their tickets in person.
Okay, over to you, Benji. That's super cool.
Hey everyone, Benji. I work in DevRel at OP Labs, where I help early teams get started on Optimism, get onboarded, and also take care of the teams that are currently on the network, and essentially try to connect everyone with each other to kind of compound the innovation that all of the other teams within this collective have. A fun fact is I was born in Nepal, and I actually spent time in high school in Costa Rica, where I went to school, where it was 140 people from 70 countries sandwiched in this little town in Costa Rica at the United World College there.
Very cool. And Alexander?
Hey, I'm Alexander. I am one of the core team members of Velodrome, and Velodrome is the largest layer 2 Ethereum DEX and the largest protocol on Optimism. Fun non-Web3 fact about me. I struggle because this has been my life for so long now. But hey, I think I got 2 black cats at home. One's named Ellsworth, one's named Bosworth. Love those guys. They help bring the stress level down on some of those crazy days. And another fun fact is I have yet to leave Paris. I was out here for ETH Paris and just been hanging out, enjoying France for a little bit.
Great, enjoyed out there. I think in the next section, we're gonna kick it off with Benji and going through OP Labs.
Let's go. Hello, everybody again. So Optimism. I'm going to give a brief overview of what Optimism is, how it works. I'm going to share some stats, and I'm going to share a little bit about our working relationship with Infura, with Velodrome, and the stuff that we want to do in the future. I would also like to end with a call to action for any builder out here listening, regardless of what it is you do, whether it's educational side of things, whether it's content, whether it's building dApps or infrastructure. We have a home for all builders. So I'm excited to kick this off. Little inside joke there. What is Optimism? A layer 2 scaling platform? Yes. A collective? Also yes. An oasis for coordination and retroactive funding? Also yes. So what does all that mean? A layer 2 scaling platform, we exist to scale Ethereum block space. So Ethereum, we all know, has relatively high gas in some periods, especially right now. I believe gas is spiking. And a layer 2 scaling platform essentially scales the block space so more folks can come in and get better fees, faster transactions, while still enjoying the security of Ethereum. So that's on the technical side of what Optimism does. The second thing, Optimism is also a collective. So we have the Optimism Collective, which is our governance side, where we have this whole array of people from all over the world, from all across the crypto ecosystem, contributing towards governance. And that ladders into various different things that we do through governance. So there's like the Builders Council, for example, where there's a group of some of the biggest, like the leaders in crypto, like coming in with backgrounds from like venture, coming in with backgrounds like DeFi, who help early teams essentially like get grant funding, which is essentially a part of one thing that the collective does. The third thing is Optimism is also an oasis for coordination and retroactive funding. So I'll talk more about this specifically later on in the presentation, but Optimism, one of the core tenets, I think, in a differentiator is that we practice this idea of retroactive public goods funding on a recurring basis. What that means is we live in a world where like a lot of public goods are not funded. So what is a public good in general? Like it could be anything that essentially like helps a collective grow. So for example, in your daily life, like if you live in a city, a public good is a park. A public good is like people who help clean the streets. A public good is education. In crypto, that could mean anything from like Solidity is a public good. Ethereum is a public good. Any open source software in the internet is essentially a public good. So we are an oasis for essentially like retroactively funding these public goods. So that's a brief overview on like general, all the stuff that Optimism covers. And now I want to get into the how. So this is an analogy that I like to use to explain L2s. Please bear with me and please give me any feedback on what you guys think on this. But essentially, let's imagine you open up a sneaker store in the middle of a busy city. Let's say New York City, for example. It's 2016, you start the sneaker store, and there's not a lot of people coming in to buy sneakers. But over time, suddenly in 2017, it catches on. Now your store in New York is just getting filled with people. There's so many. Everybody wants a bit of some shoes from you. Unfortunately, what happens is the lines get really long. There's no breathing room in the store. People are upset because they can't. Either the sneakers get too expensive, or two, they just can't buy the sneakers because it's just too long of a line. So as a business owner, you think, okay, what can I do to fix this? So you come up with this idea of opening up a warehouse, perhaps close by, let's say New Jersey, and you open up this warehouse, and that is the L2. So that's your L2. Now this warehouse has an inventory of way more sneakers, and there's your L2. But now you need to also hire people to maintain the warehouse, and you need to make sure that they're like keeping track of the inventory and making sure that you know how much profit they're generating, etc. So you ask them to periodically send you receipts of how many sneakers they're selling, etc. That is a proof. Those proofs can be optimistic. Those proofs can be ZKs. It can be anything within that realm. So now let's say you have this warehouse, it's going great, but you realize that there's other folks maybe in Japan who also want more shoes, and maybe like your warehouse in New Jersey is not catering to the crowd in Japan, for example. So you come up with a dilemma here. You're like, okay, do I go to Japan and do I create a new warehouse, or do I create a blueprint for other people to go in and be able to create a warehouse themselves? So essentially, what we're trying to think there is like the blueprint that allows other folks to go and set up their own shops across the world is the OP stack. So now in this reality, we have this OP stack realm. There's a Superchain. So an example here that's happening is Base is an OP chain, OP stack chain that we're part of the Superchain. And there's all these warehouses across the board. So the beauty of that right now, which is interesting and what I think the world we're heading into in the crypto space right now, is it increases modularity and increases this idea of shared innovation. If every single person and if all these warehouses are using the exact same blueprint, then any changes that happen to the blueprint can apply to everybody else. So if one warehouse comes up with something really incredible, like it's a new advancement, in a warehouse example, maybe it's a faster way for delivery. Well, everyone else using that same blueprint also inherits that. On the other side, let's say like there's a other business, right? That's your startup on the other side, and you see like, okay, I want to make a startup for warehouse businesses. I want to help the delivery side, delivery time for them. You're left with two options in this reality. One, you could build your business and then go and try to make your own warehouse from scratch, which takes ages. So this is like you're working on like a alternative DA layer system, for example. You can either build your own chain with that DA system, and like have to go through the whole hurdle, have to hire like a bunch of BD people, a bunch of folks all across the board to just like get apps on your platform and all of that. Or you could actually just like build your system, then come to one of these blueprint warehouses, ask them if they're interested in implementing it. If they implement it and if they like it, then like you already have access to all of the entire blueprint. So one thing that we're seeing there, which is interesting, is like Optimism is a rollup that's obviously like in the name, people are like, okay, this is just an optimistic rollup. I think it's a misconception based on the reality of what's happening, where if you actually look at what's happening within the RFP process, which is a request for proposal process that the collective, again, like puts out, we're getting like a bunch of teams from across the board building ZK proofs for the OP stack, building ideas for like shared sequencing, all of these things. And essentially we're getting this shared innovation layer. So Sneaker Store is Ethereum L1, Warehouse is L2, and the blueprint is the OP stack. And we're getting a lot of different warehouses spun up all across the board. So this is Base, Superchain, Gitcoin's chain as well, and obviously a lot more. WorldCoin is just launched as well. They're laddering into that Superchain future as well. So that's a general explanation of what's happening. The current reality of that is when we look at like the statistics so far, Optimism has had a massive bedrock upgrade, which allows for this reality that I just shared. And if you look at the fees, currently we are actually getting a fee spike because WorldCoin has launched. But as you can see, we're consistently across the board very much lowering down the fees, especially if you compare it below with Ethereum. An exciting update that's coming up is EIP 4844, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard about. And that is projected to lower fees up to 50 to 100x from what it is today. Can we get the next slide, please? So back to the idea of essentially retroactive public goods funding. Optimism has earmarked 880 million OP for retroactive public goods funding. And we've actually run about 3 different rounds for this. What this means is basically we find builders across the board who can build things that help the collective, that essentially can be a public good. It can be anything that fits these sort of tenets. And we give them retroactive funding. The idea behind retroactive funding is it's funding after impact. And the key word here is impact. The idea here is essentially if you think about like public goods, if you are opening up the door and saying, hey, you can build any public good and you could get rewarded for it, you get into this trap where someone might have a really nice pitch deck and then share and then they get funded and then like nothing happens, which is why within this realm, like we want to make sure that we're funding real impact. So this specific slide shows you the next round of public goods funding, which is about 30 million OP that is being given out for retroactive public goods funding in the next round for builders who are building open source public goods or anything that fits within these tenets that help the collective. The idea there is essentially like to end financial martyrdom for building something that benefits everybody versus having to build just solely for yourself. Can we get next slide, please? The stuff on the Superchain, like just sharing some news here, is like this essentially are all the things that happened, I believe, this week or in the past 2 weeks. You can see various different teams are coming in and adding like building ZK proofs for the OP stack. The WorldCoin protocol has launched on OP mainnet. The idea of the Superchain of like how we need to kind of build this like collective ecosystem to truly scale block space and be able to share all of this with each other is kind of one of the tenets that we're heading into. And it's very, very exciting to see this world emerge. Now, in terms of like getting involved and working, and here's where like, I think this is where it becomes very clear that Optimism as a network and all of our partners, such as Infura, such as Velodrome, have been putting a lot of time and effort in ensuring that like builders and new folks entering the ecosystem have a great stay and can like very much get onboarded. And one of our partners, ETH Global, and again, Base and Zora, we're doing this super hack. So August 4th to 18th, there's a big virtual hackathon that people can come in and build stuff. And you know, there's a bunch of bounties up for grabs. There's also a bunch of space for new ideas to emerge. If you're a builder and you want to head into this, there are so many different options. Infura has been an incredible partner in just helping us like get all of these builders started. As you know, like I'm sure like we'll hear later on in the presentation, just how easy it is for someone to get onboarded, just how easy it is to like not have to worry about all of these different things, because Infura can just help you get a start essentially. And one of the key things is like when we think of that coordination between the Infiras, between the Velodromes, between the Optimisms, it's not only just coordination that results in like companies and like protocols doing it, but it's you as a builder. You can also essentially be able to join this realm, build the things that you want to build. We're all here to support you. And it's truly, truly been remarkable to just see. And on the general like statistics side, I think like when we look at the growth of the L2 ecosystem and when you look at the growth of Optimism over the past year and even over the past like 3 days, honestly, we've seen that like collectively all of us working together has allowed for users to not face the burden of like high load. You know, in Ethereum, we see a lot of gas fee spikes. In Optimism, despite like a WorldCoin launch, for example, we're still seeing consistent fees across the board. We're still seeing great user experiences. And a lot of that is due to the help that we get from our partners. So why is what I would like to end on as well is like, why do we need to do this? Like, why do we need to scale block space? Why is it even relevant? Who cares, right? Well, one of the ideas is scaling decentralized compute. I think this is like a general theme that makes a lot of sense personally, in like why crypto is needed as a whole. If you look at like things that happen in the real world, let's say like there's a classic one right now is like the person who had the X handle on Twitter just got it taken away from them completely. It was just like de facto, someone pressed the button and it's gone. Well, when you have decentralized compute, you actually own your data, you actually own what you're doing. And we do want to live in an internet that is much more free and open for people who can actually like own what it is. As we get more and more digital, as our life enters into this like stream of the metaverse, etc., like you don't want to live in a world where essentially everything's held. There's one person with a button that can just change everything, which is why scaling decentralized compute is actually like a very important goal that I believe all of us in crypto are striving towards. The second thing is ending the multipolar trap. A multipolar trap is when multiple different people end up like fighting with each other. There becomes like tribalism. There's all these things that happen that like eventually leads to a zero-sum game. One of the ideas on how we can end the multipolar trap is this concept of retroactive public goods funding. It's also this idea of like coming together through this OP stack, like open source system, where we can all collaborate. Like let's expand the pie together is one of the largest things that I hear on a daily basis of like, where is crypto today? What products are being used at scale? And the answer is a little hard to come up with right now. And we believe that the answer can emerge once we're able to essentially bring all of this innovation, bring all of this mind share into this blueprint, and allow people to just come on and add to the blueprint and distribute and spread their innovations. So how can you get involved? Well, I think the super hack is a great opportunity for new builders to start. There's a lot of ways to get set up for the super hack, and that would be a great start. I will also be dropping a Telegram link to a group chat essentially for anyone who's interested in joining, and hopefully like if we can work that out after. Happy to answer any questions. There are multiple levels of support. Like I said earlier, you know, I think when we think of builders, traditionally it's like only technical folks, but I think what we're heading into with this concept of like retro funding and just all of the things going on, there's governance, there's social stuff, there's DeFi, there's NFTs, there's like music, there's all of these things. Everyone is welcome. So we want to open up all doors for everyone to come join Optimism, build on Optimism, help us build a super chain. And we work with all of the folks on this call to make that possible. So thank you. And that's a quick intro on Optimism.
Thank you so much. I think we're going to move straight to EG. We'll take the questions at the end. Go ahead, EG.
All right, thanks, Clemens. All right, everybody, let's talk about Infi and infrastructure. So we started Infi in 2016, and we were focused on just trying to build something that was useful for the ecosystem at the time. Within Consensus, there were a lot of early projects that were starting up, some focused on identity. MetaMask is one I'm sure everybody knows and uses well as an early wallet and browser experience for Ethereum. And I and the founders of Infi had been just trying to solve a problem for our friends within the company that were trying to focus on their core product. The increasing demands of running a node and keeping it online and available and making it something that they was becoming an issue, and it needed to be something that they didn't have to worry about so that they could focus on building their actual product. And we started Infura, focused on helping support MetaMask's developer beta that had launched in the summer of 2016. And later on that year, about 3 months later, we opened up Infura so that anybody could sign up and get immediate access to Ethereum, IPFS, and then eventually we added other networks as that became more in demand, Optimism being one of the most popular networks that we added in the last couple of years. Next slide, please. When we started Infura, we started with a very simple architecture. It's very different than what you see in front of you in this current architecture diagram. When you think about how you connect to a blockchain is a peer-to-peer network. So all of these people that are starting to try to create their new identities and get connected on WorldCoin, as an example, to be able to connect to a blockchain network like that, you traditionally have to run the node or the client to connect you to the peer-to-peer network. So imagine if the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that are trying to register for WorldCoin right now had that as a requirement. When we were focused on the early problems of how to grow Ethereum, we were looking at how to minimize friction and increase adoption. And so it went from just running one Ethereum node to a couple of Ethereum nodes and more as the way that we would scale this service that we would offer to others. So it was an offering of don't run your own infrastructure. You can use this endpoint that's already synced and available. But all of a sudden we started getting hammered with a bunch of traffic, and we realized, okay, we need to actually build something better than just putting this regular Ethereum client out there and opening it up to people to use. So we started to optimize. We started with optimizing things like our event log index. So when somebody is trading NFTs or doing something else on chain that's generating on-chain events, all of that is adding data to the chain that makes it grow, and it makes it more difficult to query that information. And so a service like Infura needs to index that information so that it's stored for performant data retrieval, and we're able to not just meet but exceed the performance capabilities of a traditional Ethereum client. And we started to grow from there. We didn't have the luxury of having enough resources to look at the problem of what's the ideal way to build this. We sort of had to grow with the ecosystem as the ecosystem grew and our traffic grew, which was something was on fire, and whatever was on fire ended up being the thing that we would have to optimize. So the famous example that we always talk about is the CryptoKitties example. When CryptoKitties launched on mainnet towards the end of 2017, and the transaction pool was getting flooded with a bunch of transactions with people trying to interact with CryptoKitties, like that was just one problem. It was causing quite a few other problems for those of us that were running Ethereum nodes at the time. And both like the Ethereum core developers had to fix the systems that were disrupted within the Ethereum client itself. And for us within Infura, we would have to optimize it. So during that period, we ended up splitting out a separate subsystem that would handle how we propagated transactions and made sure that when somebody sent us a transaction, whether that was directly or through one of our integrated products or customers like MetaMask, that when we received the transaction, we were able to still propagate that out regardless of how congested the transaction pool was. So what we ended up building ended up being a lot more complex, what we have now versus what we had a couple of years ago. And this problem is not just relevant to Ethereum. It's relevant to any network that's seeing significant growth. People running Optimism nodes definitely saw that over the last year and a half. And the approach that we ended up taking is recognizing that we as Infura can't just continually add every single network that is seeing like heavy adoption. We tried for a while to just focus on Ethereum and said that when other networks are going to be valuable for us to add, it's going to be developers that are asking for us to add them. And over the last couple of years, many developers came to us asking us to add additional networks and layer 2s, Optimism again being the one that was heavily asked for by people saying, I need to build an application on Optimism, or we're looking at exploring building something on top of Optimism. What offering do you have that could help us with that? And what you see before you in this like architecture diagram had to be replicated for our Optimism infrastructure. Next slide, please. So how do we scale that? Just like how Optimism is looking at, being able to use a template to scale out what they're doing and have some shared components and shared infrastructure that others can use. We took a similar approach when we launched our decentralized infrastructure network last year. We announced this at ETH Berlin in last September, and we're building a decentralized RPC as a service is kind of how you can look at DIN. DIN is supposed to be a way to build out the capabilities for Web3 to service the needs regardless of what new networks come around. WorldCoin is the popular one right now. We don't know what people are going to be asking for us to support 2 months from now or 6 months from now. With the decentralized infrastructure network, we're creating a marketplace of providers that can service this RPC and API demand for customers that have the need to consume data for a given blockchain. Can you get to the next slide, please? When you look at how dApps interact with blockchains, they're typically going to a service like Infura, which is considered a gateway. And that gateway is the entry point and access point to getting information that they need from the network or propagating transactions out to the network. Infura started out as the first one, but we're not the only one. There are dozens of different operators out there. And if you're a dApp that requires access to a specific network, you have to go out there, sign up for one of our sites, put in all of your payment information, and then you can start using the service. But if there are multiple services that provide the same service capabilities and service quality, it makes sense for you to have redundancy and resiliency in the application that you're providing by using multiple providers. If you go to any of the popular dApps that are out there and you actually look at how they get their blockchain data by looking up like the developer console, looking at how it's making requests, you'll see that a lot of these applications are pulling data from Infura and maybe like one or two other providers so that they can get data in case there's any sort of so that they can check the accuracy of the data across services. And then also that if there was any service that had an outage, they would be able to seamlessly fail over to someone else. And that's something that really has become the best way to build in Web3. It's very difficult for traditional Web2 companies to do that because data tends to be siloed. Only one person has access to that data. But blockchain data is public and permissionless, and anybody who has the ability to run a node can get that same data. The problem is scaling that data. So with our DIN offering, we're developing new tooling to share and make it something that other people can run and help optimize so that we can all benefit from advancements in how we query this data and pull this data for a specific blockchain. So with this, there's, sorry, could you go back to the previous slide, Clemens? I can go over like a very brief overview of what the components are in this architecture. So an operator like Infura would be considered a node operator, and that node operator is servicing a specific blockchain. We can talk about Optimism today and say that we're going to publish that we're a provider that's here servicing Optimism traffic, and we register with a node registry. There would be another entity on this network called a watcher that's able to take a look at that node registry and run a certain amount of assessments against Infura, in this case, as an operator, and publish these out. These are sort of like status messages of this entity is here, it's offering these capabilities, and the performance metrics look like this. And then a gateway that's out there. So I know Optimism runs its own gateway. Other Layer 2 projects also run their own gateways for their users, can take that stream of information and then make their own routing decisions on which operators they're going to use and how their traffic gets routed. And then dApps have the option of going directly to a specific operator still, or utilizing the information that's coming from this stream to make their routing decisions. Next slide, please. And this is what we feel like is necessary for us to support the people that are building on top of Infura. We can't scale our team fast enough to support all of the new networks that are coming up. The thing that's made Infura successful has been working closely with early projects and builders that are very passionate about a specific idea and are trying to just get it out there and make it something that's used by whether it's developers or consumers. And for us, DIN is the best way for us to ensure that these developers, you all, will continue to get access to the networks that you need access to, and you're not going to be stuck behind the timeline of how long it takes Infura to add a specific network. We'll build this infrastructure that allows the community to help add that functionality as it's necessary. And in the context of Optimism, think about we're working closely with the Base team and helping support Base. That's one of the networks building on top of the OP stack. There's a couple of other people that we're talking to that are building on top of the OP stack. That means that node kit that we're talking about needs to be optimized to run the OP stack. And we're going to continue working closely with Optimism to ensure that any new networks that you might be building or building on top of are well served by the DIN infrastructure kit. If you go to our website right now, take a look. We have some great tutorials on there on how to get started building on top of Ethereum, building on top of Optimism. We've started also creating some additional tooling to ease some pain points for you. Additional APIs, things around account abstraction are definitely coming soon from Infura and the rest of our tooling partners at Consensus. And we also started creating things like faucets to solve that simple problem of how to get started. Here's all these great APIs and tools, but I just need testnet ETH. And if you have any difficulties getting Gurley ETH in the past or Sepolia ETH and others, hopefully our testnet faucet is able to help you out. So that's it. Take a look at infura.io, look at our educational resources, reach out to us. We have a DIN Discord channel that's going to be opened up so that others can start joining pretty soon, and you can talk to us about DIN, keep up to date with the progress that we're making on the protocol development, and look forward to sharing more with you soon.
Great, thank you, EG. Is the early adopter program for DIN still open, or is that closed?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we haven't closed that.
All right, I'll drop the link in the chat. Great, and last but not least, Alexander, please take it away.
Hello. Yes, thank you. So yeah, I'm Alex, and I'm here to talk about Velodrome. If you are not already familiar with Velodrome, we are the largest DEX on Ethereum Layer 2. and we are the largest DEX on, or largest protocol on Optimism. And I think the best way to explain sort of what Velodrome is that we combine the best of Curve, Convex, and Uniswap all into a single streamlined DEX design. So we service liquidity providers, traders, protocols, and basically make it highly efficient for folks to build deep liquidity on their tokens on Optimism, traders to be able to sort of swap and engage with them, and protocols to be able to sort of basically spend as little as possible to sort of maintain their liquidity. So in terms of our role within the broader Optimism ecosystem, I think in many ways we serve as the front door of the ecosystem. So one of the main jobs that we do is working closely with Benji and others is when a new protocol is wondering about where to deploy. Do we deploy to Arbitrum, Mainnet, some Alt L1, or maybe they have already chosen Optimism? We get engaged with them early. We introduce them to the sort of Velodrome model. We help them to sort of bootstrap that initial liquidity, and that is of course important because liquidity on your token is what will make your protocol able to work and grow within an ecosystem. And once they're here, we help connect them to other builders within the ecosystem, get integrated into different applications. We do a lot of work helping to bring builders and protocols along the journey in OP governance. So as Benji set up, one of the amazing things about the Optimism ecosystem is that they make it super easy for you to get started. So they have a variety of grant programs. Right now, if you've got a great idea or a protocol and you're looking to build on Optimism, the process might seem a little intimidating at first glance, but we're there to sort of help walk you through it, and then you can maybe get some resources to get things going. And then, as Benji also said, if your idea, if what you are building has impact, there's this amazing opportunity, and there's nothing else like this in crypto, to get rewarded in the form of retroactive public goods funding. And this all goes back to a Vitalik idea, right? Which is it's so much easier to look at what's worked and reward it than it is to look at something and determine if this will work. And retroactive public goods funding is just that like kind of net that that if you come and you build something, even if it's a public good, even if you take no fees from it, even if you don't, you don't have a business model associated with it, you just want to build like cool shit. Retroactive public goods funding will be the kind of thing that will be sure that you are able to sort of be rewarded and recognized for that. And it's a combination of all these things, right? This like onboarding engine, the ability to attract highly capital efficient liquidity, more capital efficient than anywhere else in DeFi. And then both the sort of proactive grants, the growth grants, as well as the retroactive public grants, I think truly makes Optimism the best place to build. And I think it is why you are seeing such explosive growth in Optimism right now on mainnet. And then, of course, in anticipation of the Superchain, which is something we are extremely bullish on. So if you want to jump to the next slide, I'll just hit some more stats because we recently launched Velodrome V2, which was a complete overhaul of the underlying protocol. And since we launched Velodrome V2, things have really gone quite parabolic. So you can see we have this chart here of sort of this explosion in fees that we've seen on Velodrome V2. We've seen the same thing with voting incentives. And what this is really all about is that incentives are critical for making decentralized systems work, right? If we don't want middle layers, if we don't want management, participants in decentralized systems need to have incentives, be rewarded for taking, for acting, and behaving in certain ways to sort of make these systems work. So we've seen this extraordinary shot of growth. We've onboarded, I think, 40 or 50, new protocols to the ecosystem, and we have them all sort of contributing to the overarching flywheel. But we have a bunch of new things as well, and this sort of links into the Infura piece. But when we wanted to build the sort of V2 front end, we have some developers who are very passionate about the fact that 90% of Web3 UX, 90% of Web3 front ends suck. They are really, really terrible. I think there's this like notion in the industry. It's like, well, as long as the incentives work, who really cares? It's like people will dive all the way into the contracts if they need to like extract that value. Our devs really were only interested in working on this project if they felt they could build a front end that was truly completely decentralized. No APIs, no caching. All the data, all the information comes live from the chain and presents that information back in ways that are very easy to understand, whether you're kind of at the beginning of the curve of like just getting involved in crypto to sort of a seasoned pro, right? Our sort of goal was to design a front end that could support users at any point in that adoption curve. And I think Infura was very helpful for us because the low latency endpoints make all that sort of very easy, very accessible for a decentralized app with no APIs, right? To populate all that information. Support for batched RPC requests make our front end extremely responsive, a much smoother user experience. Large RPC responses. So we have this on-chain API that returns these large data sets. Many RPC vendors just can't support this. And I would just say generally, I think that the people have been great. Great support, great dashboard, great quality of service. And yeah, I mean, when we wanted to build something that we truly felt like was going to be, the next generation DEX built natively on Ethereum layer 2, we didn't want to compromise anywhere. And that's where, working with folks like Infura has been very, very helpful for us.
Great. Thank you so much. So, final thoughts. I think the theme overall is that anyone can be a builder in Web3, not just developers. This is all open source, and I'm sure you can find your space and superpower and contribute, and decentralization is the way, right? So if you're launching a new use case, or if you have an idea, I would connect with OP Labs for the option of launching a Superchain, as well as looking at grants and look at the hackathon. Then connect with Infura for bootstrapping those nodes and scaled access to those endpoints. And then lastly, connect with Velodrome to create liquidity and bridging on their new version 2. So some quick recap highlights. I think I love the optimism analogy around the sneaker store, and the blueprints of the OP stack really resonates for modularity. And I think that there's a lot of open source and white labeling involved there. That's pretty interesting. I would look forward to layer 3s as well, and also interoperability of those assets between different OP stack superchains. And one more thing is Consensus actually is hosting currently a Not Another virtual hackathon, and I can share a link to the virtual space for that as well. But I'm sure you can contribute to both hackathons and come up with ideas. There are bounties for Infura there. Okay, and for Velodrome, test out your curve, convex, and Uniswap, swapping all together. Anything that I missed? Any other final thoughts? I'm looking for any questions in the chat. Any filler questions? Ideas? If not, I believe we're pretty much up on time. We had 45 minutes. What's one example of retroactive public good funding?
Yeah, I could take that. So it's hard to pinpoint one specific example because it's very broad, but I can share projects in the last round. So we had 10 million OP in our PGF that got funded. So Solidity, that was funded. Programming language Ethereum is built on. All the developers that maintain it, they got funding. There were some NFT platforms, NFT collections that actually educated and onboarded users, spent a lot of time there. They got funded. Boardtown. There was a content creator called Subly DeFi who makes this amazing newsletter, by the way, which was like he was constantly making newsletters. He got funded. There have been apps as well that are basically bringing people onto Optimism. Back to like the slide that I shared and the link that I shared kind of shows all the tenets through which someone can get funded. So yeah, there's a myriad of examples. I think one of the things to think about with public goods funding is, let's just use the Solidity example, right? The Solidity example, Solidity exists and is being maintained because the people there really care. They're not making a profit out of it, but they really care, and they'd be like, out of the goodness of their hearts, they've been building this thing and maintaining it for all of us to use. The chances of that being repeated are low, right? Like there's not a lot of people in the world who would happily just like give up, not really get paid, give up money and like not get paid to build something that helps everybody, because like you have to eat, you have to live. Well, retroactive public goods funding basically allows for there to be more folks, like the folks contributing to Solidity, like the folks contributing to all these open source projects, and we actually give them an opportunity to get paid. And what does that mean for everybody else? Well, like Solidity exists that allows all of us to exist. All these things basically are things that have not been given funding before that now have a chance to get funding. So that's one example, but it's very much not limited. Anything that helps the collective grow, whether it be education, whether it be adapt, whether it be a collection, whether it be infra, whether it be a programming language or a contribution to the OP stack, all are welcome. You just have to prove impact. So it is retroactive. And nominations open around fall, where we'll have this thing called the impact registry and all of that. We really are conscious about identity as well and reputation with the collective. So, there's things called trust tiers. So if you get RPGF, you get grant funding, you're given an attestation, and you increase in trust tiers, which then opens more doors for you in terms of like getting future funding and all that. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
That's great. It reminds me of kind of academic PhD programs looking for grants. And then I like the retroactive part because then you have already the proof that the work is done. And maybe are there open bounties and areas of rewards as well? Can you see what's missing in the ecosystem, and can people suggest products or features?
Yeah, so we actually do a lot on GitHub. There's an ideas list. I will share the link. This is like a bunch of ideas. One is like an RFP for like building a ZK proof for the OP stack. That's intense, right? We have Mina protocol, risk zero, et cetera, who put in proposals for that. But the other stuff is anything, really. There's some crazy ideas in there. There's some fun ideas and hackathon ideas. And we really encourage, we want to listen to you. You all, if you have a fun idea that you want to see get built, let us know. We'll add it to the GitHub and we'll see if someone can go and build it, whether it's a hackathon or a whole company. And it's very much open in terms of who can build what. And, it's all open source to begin with. So just hop on the GitHub and scroll through any idea, reply as a comment if you're going to build it, and we'll help you out.
Yeah, I love it. The science projects are super important because you get subtraction and then you get a lot of attention as well.
Yeah, I think one thing that comes to mind a lot, I don't want to take too much time with this, but essentially when we think about what is funded in the world today, the only things that are really funded are things that have a clear line of profit. You see people building really cool businesses, but they never go to market because they're like, oh, I have no monetization strategy. No VC is going to fund me. And you end up in the world where some of the coolest, craziest science experiments never actually end up coming to fruition because it's they get stonewalled at damn, how do I monetize this? And whether either they monetize too early or they don't monetize at all and they never get funding. Well, this kind of gives an outlet for more creative expression, creative innovation without the stone wall of you have to be profit generating from day one. So that's kind of one of the tenets as well. So definitely encouraging innovation, definitely encouraging that's why the super hack is super exciting for me. Said super a few times, but yeah, we just want to see some crazy ideas.
great call to action. Any other questions, comments? Overlap with AI, anyone?
Yeah, wow.
I've seen, I think Avalanche use Kava.ai, which has like a Discord bot that knows all of the Avalanche documentation. And then I think DeFi Llama created a ChatGPT plugin.
And Dune as well. I think you can like generate. They haven't rolled it out fully, but you can generate full graphs by just telling AI what you want it to do. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, writing the Dune analytics queries for you, which is pretty great.
I'm also curious of like how the OpenAI X WorldCoin like relationship would be like, just given the same founder. Just to see if there's something there.
Well, replace your ChatGPT Plus subscriptions with WorldCoin, proof of identity, register at your latest, floating orb hackathon, and then you can, that's an option for payments. That would be kind of cool. Or staking. You have to stake with your AI bot. Okay, well, thank you so much to the speakers, and we will send a follow-up email with all the links summarized.
Thank you all.
All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And the
Bye-bye.
recording's on the same link. It'll get processed, and if you want to watch the recording, just follow the same link. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.